Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jeveline A. Perez, and this time we will going to have a discussion about Chapter 6, Feeding Relationships of an Intertidal Zone and Estuaries Ecosystem. Learning objectives. At the end of this lesson, the student should be able to identify that living and non-living things in an ecosystem, and number 2 is describe estuaries and intertidal zone. So, the earth is a huge ecosystem that consists of living and non-living factors. One of the living factors is the most important is the light from the sun. The light from the sun is the source of energy for the whole ecosystem. The energy is passed from one organisms to another. Every energy is lost of environment is heat. That is why the earth needs a constant supply of light energy from the sun. How does the earth use energy for the sun? The living things in an ecosystem of the is consist of producer, consumers, and decomposers. So energy and nutrients are transferred from a producer to decomposer through their feeding relationships. Producer are green plants, algae, or microorganisms that are capable of making their own food. They make their own food by converting the energy from the sun into a chemical energy. So producers is provide energy and nutrients to other organisms. So ibig sabihin, sila ang naghatag og energy ug nutrients sa isa ka organismo. So estuaries and intertidal zone make up an ecosystem living and non-living things in this environment interact with each other. So they exhibit feeding relationships that are able to then nutrients and energy to the cycle through them. Consumers get their feeding on plants and other organisms. So ang consumers daw is mauna siya ang gakaon sa laing nga organisms. So therefore all animals are consumers. So tanang animals is consumers kay ginakaon man nila, like for example ang butiki ginakaon ay ang langaw insects ginakaon sa butiki or sa frog. Mao na siya ang isa sa example sa consumers. So therefore all animals are consumers. Organisms that eat only plants are called herbivore. So tanang animals or organismo nga gakaon og plants are ginatawag nga herbivore. So they are known as the primary consumers. Sila ang una nga ga-consume. Then living things that eat other animals are called carnivore. So ang mga animals nga gakaon og lain nga animals are called carnivore. So carnivores that eat herbivores are known as the secondary consumer. So ginatawag sila nga secondary consumer kay ang tanang animals nga gakaon og plants og meat. So carnivores that feed on other carnivores are tertiary consumers. So sila ang ikatulong nga consumers or ginatawag na to nga tertiary consumers kay gakaon sila og meat to meat. To some animals like humans eat both plants and animals are called omnivores. So katong tulong nga akong na-mention gaina is ginatawag to siya nga omnivores if magakaon sila og like para sa humans og plants og meat. Last is ang decomposers. So decomposers get energy by breaking down dead organisms under waste. So ang decomposers kay makakuha lang na siya og energy by breaking or ilang mapatay ang usak or ang patay nga organismo. So when they break down their dead organism and waste, nutrients from them are returned to the environment. So ang kani nga mga animals is mabalik na siya sa yuta. Like for example, malata siya, mabalik siya sa ang iyang nutrients mabalik sa yuta, sa environment. These nutrients are needed by plants, for their growth and development. Examples of decomposers and fungi and bacteria. So kani nga mga organisms is mabalik siya sa environment. Example is ang fungi ug ang bacteria, kay ang fungi ug ang bacteria kay mao naman na siya ang mahimo nga kaning organisms nga waste. Food chain. The feeding relationships among organisms can be shown by a food chain. A food chain is a series of organisms in which each organism feeds on another organisms and so on. So a food chain is always begins with a producers and next with us primary consumer, next is secondary consumer and tertiary consumer. So this is the examples of a food chain. So ang producers niya is ang diatoms, then ang iyang primary consumer is ang shrimp, then ang sunod kay ang fish, kay ginakaon sa fish ang shrimp, then ang fish is ginakaon po siya sa heron. So nag-connect na sila tulo. Next is food web. When food chain are interlinked, they form a food web. So a food web is consist of two or more food chains. So ang food web is nagcompose siya og two or more food chains. So ang iyahang examples is ang producers diya is diatoms, then ang shrimp unya kauno na pud siya sa lain nga organisms, then ang murag kibali nagsumpay-sumpay sila ba, like kibali naara sila sa isa ka symbols, then ang ilahang feeding relationship is nag-interlink og two or more groups. That is food web.